Hi, I'm Will Holbrow,
And I'm Ari Levine. Welcome to The Path That Makes Us.
a show led by two Kellogg MBAs to highlight the different career paths, the lessons they learned along the way, and the journeys they took to get there.
All to help you craft your own path.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to episode 4 of The Path That Makes Us. I'm Will Holbrow. I'm joined here with my co-host, Ari Levine. And today we have a very special guest. We have Alden Sulger, a buddy of mine from college. Alden, how you doing today?
Good. Thanks for having me on today, guys.
Well, to kick us off, we'd love to just hear a little bit about your background, kind of where you come from, where you're at now, and then we can dive into some of the specifics on the career moves you've made, personal decisions, all of it.
Yeah, happy to start it off. So, thanks for the introduction, Will. By ways of introduction, my name's Alden Soldier. Born and raised in the Chicagoland area. As you mentioned, attended University of Michigan with yourself. Had a great time there. Studied economics and environmental science. And kind of to start my professional career, didn't really know what I wanted to do. Know I wanted to be around finance. So started with a few internships in venture capital, private equity before ultimately landing a junior year internship at an investment bank here in Chicago called Lincoln International. Did that during COVID when the world was on fire, but came back after graduation. Did 2 years investment banking, primarily in the sell side, M&A, at Lincoln, working in the business services group. After 2 years in banking, wanted to kind of get more on the strategy and buy side side of M&A. So pivoted to corporate development for a company called DCC Propane. Since then, I transitioned to a company called Energy Exemplar, and I'm obviously able to talk more about these companies. But and then just recently, I just signed a new job to join next week at a company called Resource Innovations. So all jobs in the kind of corporate development buy side for private equity owned businesses.
Wow. Well, congrats on the jump there. That should be very exciting.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're looking forward to hearing all about these different roles. Appreciate the introduction.
Yeah.
Would love to go all the way back to your college days when you decided to go into the real world and all of a sudden the world shuts down. Can you talk us through a little bit about what it was like learning and working at an investment bank during the global pandemic?
Yeah, it was definitely an interesting experience. So we kind of came in, my intern class was about 35 individuals, all college juniors, and then a few MBA intern associates. And so yeah, so we came in expecting to be kind of thrown into the ringer, expecting to be in office every day. And we were lucky at that time. I know a few other investment bank and internship programs got canceled entirely. So our Lincoln made it their duty to give us an experience. However, the live deal reps that maybe a lot of us were looking forward to were just not available to the degree that they would have liked, just because the M&A activity globally didn't shut down entirely, but paused dramatically at that time, as all kind of buyers and sellers were really press and pause before making transactions in the space. So was able to work on a live deal, was doing a lot of marketing work and some case studies with the bankers. But what was supposed to be 5 days a week in the office was 5 days a week in my parents' basement. So definitely, and virtual happy hours, a lot of cringy like get-togethers. But all in all, was a good at least foray into the kind of banking space.
Very nice. And just backing it up to when you made the decision to go into banking, talk us through kind of how you made that decision. I know you mentioned that you didn't know exactly what you wanted to do. And I feel like most of us, I feel like we had that experience when we graduated, didn't really know what we wanted to do, went into consulting, investment banking, similar paths. But talk us through kind of why you made that decision, how you ended up at Lincoln, what like the networking was like, and the decisions that you made to ultimately end up there.
Yeah. So it really stems from actually the summer before I interned at Lincoln. I interned for a private equity firm. I'll admit it was a nepo hire entirely. I was working for my old soccer goalie's dad. But one of the big things that he did was use this summer, go get set up lunches, go set up coffee chats with bankers around Chicago. So we were working right downtown. And I had like summer Fridays in the sense that Fridays were used for networking amongst bankers, venture capital, whatever people I wanted to meet with, and had the opportunity to have lunch with a few actually Lincoln bankers because we were working on a deal together and worked right across the street. But ultimately connected with them. I still wasn't fully sold that banking was for me. I was still looking at some renewable energy companies, kind of strategic finance for a few other corporates. But banking process, as I'm sure you know, is the earliest in the recruitment. I mean, they were pounding us with like, what's your interview schedule first day of school when we got back junior year. So you have to be prepared for it if you are even going to consider it. Had my super day in Chicago, I think like second week of junior year, and then got it. And there was probably a little bit of like, is this really what I want to do? But a great opportunity presented itself, and I didn't have to interview the rest of junior year for a gig that summer. As I was going abroad, I could just have that figured out. So I was like, where's the dotted line signed, and the rest is history.
That's awesome. I feel these companies are acutely aware that talent, loves the security. As an undergrad, you love the idea of having a job like
Yeah.
taken care of by the time you're sophomore, junior year in college. So I feel like the recruiting timelines are getting earlier and earlier. So totally get that sentiment. I feel like Will and I also had that experience. Would love to understand a little bit. I know a lot of people, when they think of banking and finance, it's concentrated in New York. Could you talk a little bit more about what the experience is like in Chicago and perhaps how you, of course, you grew up in Chicagoland. Would love to understand more about how you made that choice, understanding maybe the trade-offs of being in New York versus Chicago.
Yeah, admittedly for me, I wasn't too focused on being in New York. Obviously, there's great opportunities and definitely could have done a short stint. But so Lincoln, like a lot of actually mid-market banks, I would say the misconception is that a lot of banks are in New York. Yes, it is the finance capital, but there's actually a lot of mid-market, Baird, Blair, Lincoln. I know Lazard has a huge presence here in Chicago. So the middle market of investment banking has a big kind of congregation in Chicago, being it as it that it has a lot of the industrial space, and industrials tend to be in kind of middle America, whereas tech is out west and kind of finance is out east. It's kind of just the generalization. Lincoln itself, though, had offices at the time I was there in like 35 cities. So it was headquartered in Chicago, but we had a New York office, LA, SF, you name it. You could go, you had deals in Texas or California, you were going out there a decent amount, similar to a consultant when kind of things were going fast. But I think Chicago is a great city in the sense that you get the kind of big city feel, but once you go home and get out of the office, you got your space. I don't think you're missing out really on any of the true networking opportunities. Like I said, I was interning the summer before, and I was able to connect with private equity, venture capital, investment bankers on a weekly basis, just within a 3-4 block radius of where I was interning that summer. yes, there aren't the headquarters of Goldman and Morgan Stanley and the big names in Wall Street. And, but I mean, there's still the CBOE. There's a lot of big shops that are still based in Chicago. So it didn't feel like I was missing out by taking a Chicago banking opportunity versus New York.
That makes a lot of sense. And to get into the kind of the meat of your investment banking experience, a lot of people have perceptions around banking where you check into the office Thursday and you don't leave till Saturday. You're working 120-hour weeks, etc. I know your experience might have been a little different, but talk us through kind of what that looked like for you, what that looked like for peers of yours, how people coped, and kind of what were the expectations going in versus like what the actual experience is, trying to like marry those up, because there's a lot of expectations around banking, even coming from business school, and we have friends going to investment banks for the summer and full-time jobs.
Yeah, I think the biggest conception, what's been spread around is not false, but I think it's over glorified in a lot of cases. And there's definitely a difference probably between the severity in middle market versus bulge bracket. So bulge bracket, I've heard the horror stories. People sleep under their desk for four straight days. They bring in their clothes on Monday for the week because they're not going home. That never happened with me. There is an element to when you're in crunch time, and there's an element to get your work done, work hard. You know what your deliverables are. You stay up until you finish them, but you can manage it in kind of a 70-hour week. It's not always 120. Weekends aren't safe necessarily, but usually you have a good idea come Thursday or Friday what if you can have fun on a Saturday and then go into the office to crank out 4 or 5 hours on a Sunday. It's once you kind of hit the 3 to 6 month threshold, when you kind of know what's going on and what expectations are, how long things are going to take you, then you can kind of plan and get a good idea of what's to come. There were very few instances for me, at least, where it was like, I came in thinking this is going to be a easier week, and it just completely blindsided me. You usually have a good idea of what's to come, which I would say is nice. With that being said, there were some weeks where I called my mom like, what the hell am I doing? I think, I got put on a pitch in my first like month for a healthcare deal that I knew nothing about. So I had to learn about this whole new industry, build a 85-page deck essentially with one other person, um, in 4 days. And it was one of those 5 a.m. nights, 4 straight days. Come Friday, it was I don't think I left my apartment the whole weekend, not because I was working, just because I was so exhausted and didn't have any social energy to interact with anyone other than my boss had been berating me for the last 72 hours. Um, there's some horror stories, but I think it gets a little overhyped in the grand scheme of things, especially in kind of the bulge bracket New York situation is going to be where you're going to find the most severe. You come to Chicago, I think that the culture of Chicago just is a little more get your work done and then also have a life.
Yeah, double clicking on that culture piece, just because investment banking is investment banking, and I think there's a high standard for work ethic across the board, uh, similar to other high achievement oriented jobs. But did you ever feel like that culture was like taken advantage of from like a manager perspective? Like, oh, just expected that like you're gonna work from 2 to 4 a.m. and finish this, and there's no real like, oh, pat on the back, like, thanks, Alden, really appreciate you like pulling one in. It's just like, that's expected of Alden. Like, he's a banker. He's going to work for till 4 a.m. and he'll wake up and he'll do it again the next day.
That's a great question. Uh, Short answer, yes, it is kind of just expected. But I would say Lincoln had a pretty appreciative and collaborative culture where for example, I would work on a few things and I had colleagues that were early risers. I myself I'm a night owl, and struggle to go to bed anyway. So I'm happy to log the hours late at night, but we could have 24-hour coverage where I could work till 4:30 and someone could be on at 5, covering. But yeah, it is a little expected. I don't know if that's changed in the wake of, I know there's been a couple recent deaths in the investment banking industry. I know there's been some rumors of maybe what we do is changing, but there's an element. They had us fib on our like timesheets. We're not billed hourly like a consultant, so it's not affecting like the client billing, but they're like, you didn't work 120 hours. Like you have to take out when you were at the office gym or transport to and from the office. Like,
Get that down to 85. Come on, get it down.
Yeah, let's, and you've got capacity for another one. Yes, there is an expectation, but I would say the resources are there if you're really underwater. Lincoln especially did a great job of like, let's take you aside. Let's help out where we can. No reason. At the end of the day, it's a job. It's not a life or death situation. If you are in a place that puts you in a very compromised position, they're going to support you. But there's some old schoolers that
sounds like an
this is what I had to do. And they especially found it because in their day, I started in a post-COVID environment where you could take your computer home and finish work at home. They were like, we were at the office till 4 a.m. every night. You can do it in your pajamas at home. The work still needs to be done. It doesn't make it that much better doing it in your pajamas.
Yeah. Yep. Exactly.
So given all these expectations with work ethic, I think that also is coupled with you spending more time on the work and hopefully having more chances to learn and get repetitions. Something you mentioned that you were looking forward to early on in the internship. Looking back and also maybe comparing to what you expected going in, what have been the key skills or learnings you've had, and how, if at all, would you advise someone thinking about banking about what should they be looking forward to, and maybe some cautionary piece of advice?
Yeah. So I'll admit, I think the Lincoln Analyst program is a little different than some others. I know some of my peers, Michigan friends who went into banking, were very modeling intensive. And that was like, let's run a DCF LBO model from the get-go. They become just Excel wizards, and true kind of finance quants. We were much more in the analyst program focused on the kind of whole picture sell side process. So starting with kind of investment theses, deck building, to kind of the growth strategy and then managing a diligence process, which for those of you guys who don't know, it's a pretty detail oriented, exchanging of questions, answers, data cubes, specific contracts, etc. There's a lot of little pieces that go into it that forces you to just be organized on top of things and efficient and in your responses to the various stakeholders in the process. So what you really get out of the analyst experience is just a fundamental core of kind of work skills. So it's being organized, being efficient, prioritization. I'd say my deck building is pretty good. Excel, definitely, if you ask my boss currently, could use a little work, but I know how to get around without the mouse. But there's just an overall like get the core fundamentals of professionalization that puts you in. One I would say the part that really tests your rigor is your communication skills. So people often think that like investment banking is really you're a quant behind the computer. You just crank out models, Excel models. I would say that's like 10 to 20%, at least at Lincoln. A lot of what you're doing is collaborating with the client, with buyers if you're on the sell side, on the process, working with your team. It's very few things that you're working on you're doing independently. All deal teams, there's kind of like 4 to 6 people. So you're managing what needs to get done with the other team members. And then you're also communicating with some pretty C-level individuals. So you have constant communication with CEOs, CFOs. Uh, Not everyone is a Fortune 500 company CEO or CFO, but it's still industry leaders that you have to be able to kind of sometimes dumb things down that aren't super kind of involved in processes a lot, or try and read up to be as educated so you can speak the language with these individuals in kind of industries that maybe you're not as familiar with. So it's a lot of quick learning, but really the baseline professionalization is the key thing that you get out, and obviously financial acumen, business acumen in general that just comes with reps and being around these smart people who've been doing it for a long time.
Awesome. And then the second part of the question, for people maybe looking to get into investment banking, what advice would you give them? And then second part, what kind of skills do you think, or traits do you think people should have or would be nice to have when entering banking?
So the advice I'd give is go into banking with a kind of clear objective of what you want to get out of it. I think a lot of people associate banking with just like a high salary and it's like kind of finance, and that's cool. I think there's like a true skill set that you want to get out of banking. There's a ton of different finance roles out there that aren't banking that can set you up for success. So if you want to specifically be around debt transaction, private debt, private equity, like what, or you want to stay in banking for a while and then go for it. But I wouldn't just go for the sake. The skills that really, I'd say we look for are first and foremost organization. Um, no, no one was expecting people to come in being like a financial wizard. They've taken like their intro to finance, intro to accounting class and like 2 marketing classes. And we're not expecting them to like suddenly run with a model and or just bang out a DCF for evaluation purposes. We want people who are organized, willing to work hard, are able to just get along. We had the airport test. When we'd come out of an interview, we would ask amongst our team if we got delayed for a flight for 2 hours, is this someone you could kind of hang out with, shoot the shit? I don't know if I'm allowed to swear, but I already did. And just like in an airport, it's that maybe that's a Lincoln culture because we wanted people that are like-minded. And it's probably a reason why there was a lot of Michigan, Notre Dame, Big Ten individuals in general. But you want diligent, hardworking, organized individuals who are also personable, that you can, it's easy to work with and for someone that you respect. And that's something that was kind of ingrained in the motto of kind of the human capital build out for Lincoln. And I think it sticks true and stays true still to this day.
That's awesome. So I think there's this perception that at 2 years, something magical happens where analysts are now mature enough to exit into new opportunities or reach a new promotion cycle. And maybe for you too, there was a moment that you realized I've gotten what I wanted out of banking and now it's time for the next step. Can you talk us through one at a high level? Why is this 2-year mark so notorious or so infamous in the banking consulting consulting worlds or even in private equity? And also personally, what was the decision process like for you to know you've reached the point of maturity in your analyst role and we're looking for the next step?
Maturity might not be it. We had a 2-year contract. So signing bonus is tied to sticking around for 2 years. So there was contractual obligation to stick it out for the 24 months. But realistically, I think there is an element, and I'll kind of walk through the timeline. First 6 months, it's really a trial, getting reps, getting visibility to a deal at all stages. So pitch to diligence to maybe not closing in my case, but for a lot of other people, closing deals and kind of doing that whole process. That's your first 6 months. Year or 6 months to 18 months is really can run with a lot of things independently with a little kind of advice and review from an associate. 18 months plus, if you do the 24 months, or a lot of people, Lincoln has a promotion cycle that's 2.5 years usually. That's where you're really running things independently and also being able to review a younger analyst or intern's work and feel pretty confident because you've made certain mistakes, and so you know what to look for. It's really just the 2 years, I think, just coincides with probably a number of reps and kind of a true maturity. I don't think that it's perfectly aligned because everyone has a different experience just based on if they get on a suicide deal, that's full 2 years and nothing happens, but it's still taking up a lot of their time, or they're just a lot of pitching and never even get to live deals. Everyone's going to have a little different experience, but at that time, the contract expires for the 2 years. And so some people start recruiting kind of midway through their second year and private equity is big on like recruiting people while they're still in banking, um, which I think is the 1 year in is fair. Certain private equity shops start recruiting people like before they've even started in banking, and they had like their internship, and it's like, oh yeah, this is a seasoned professional who completed his Wall Street prep course. Like, we want him, and we're gonna throw a ton of money his way to come work for us in 3 years time. But no, so I think for me, I kind of reached the inflection point about 8 months into my second year, that I wasn't going to stick around and do the associate track. We started in June of 2021. My analyst class, Will and I graduated in May of 2021. And it was COVID. So I had like 3 weeks between graduation and starting banking. So rather than like try and have something locked down right when I finish up at Lincoln, I said, you know what, I'm going to decompress for a month. Went and traveled for a little bit with my little sister who had just graduated from college, and then I said, okay, I'm going to do my networking and stuff while I'm finishing up at Lincoln, but let me really think about the next step, what I'm looking for, before diving in, not just recruit in certain areas and try and land something because that's what my peers were doing. So I'd say I took a little contrarian view to the whole recruitment after banking process, but think it worked out in the long run.
Yeah. So before I ask about kind of how you landed up at DCC and what the decision was there, going back to banking, would you yourself, if you were talking to yourself at 20 years old or whenever we graduated, would you have told yourself to go into banking, or not?
I think yes, because as I've mentioned, I've pivoted a few times, and kind of the common theme during my recruitment process in the last couple of roles was banking is such a good foundation and carries with it in the industry a ton of respect, um, just because they know you've been in the trenches. So I think I would do it again. although probably a conversation for another time. I think the analyst position for banking with the rise of AI and a lot of what they're doing is going to be obliterated. I think there's going to be so many fewer, but that's for the other podcast I'm joining this afternoon. So
No, we're gonna get to AI a bit later. But want to keep rolling here onto DCC. How did that opportunity come about? You said you wanted to be intentional about where your next choice is. How did you pick the energy fields?
yeah.
Uh, and how was that experience?
Yeah. So the two things I wanted to be, I wanted to be in the energy space. As I mentioned, I studied environmental science, with economics in school, and had worked on a number of energy services projects at Lincoln and deals. I always had an inkling for the energy space, had some professional experience, and so had a focus on sticking around. I think a lot of the energy positions I was looking for, like true IPP companies like NextEra or Invenergy, um, unfortunately, a lot of the roles that I would have been eligible for would have essentially deemed a lot of what I developed in the kind of understanding of the M&A process obsolete. So ultimately, I settled at DCC. Partially, it started becoming a little longer than I had anticipated the time, and the coffers were running a little dry. But I think the big thing is DCC at the time was a retail energy distribution focused on propane services, but with a kind of interest in diversifying away. So there was a lot of interest around developing a kind of solar development, sustainable fuels, as well as kind of HVAC services. So at the time that I joined, there was a lot of um, kind of conviction around the diversification. Joined back in, what was it, September 2020. Unfortunately, that conviction that they had kind of sought to achieve did not pan out. So and for those of you who don't know the kind of propane industry, it's primarily used as a rural heating fuel. So a lot of places, Colorado, the Kentucky's, kind of the Blue Mountain areas, Utah, for the non-urban settings where natural gas pipelines make sense to serve those kind of populated areas. Propane is driven in on bobtails. You got a big tank out back, and you fill up the tanks when they're ready to be filled up, and that powers your stove and your heat in your house. It's kind of an old school fuel, but it's super common um, throughout a lot of the U.S. So the only thing that we kind of ran into is the people who have propane powering their homes are very unlikely to also want a solar panel on their homes. And this isn't a political thing. It's just, it's a little old school versus kind of, I think of solar as a little more blue leaning, and more focused on sustainability, and people who are using propane typically aren't that demographic, and usually are also a little lower income in general. And so that the kind of investment thesis that was trying to be developed when I joined, unfortunately did not pan out, from a strategic landscape.
I like to tell people he slung propane for a few years. That's
Yeah, a lot of people would get a grill and be like, "So can you hook me up?" I'm like, "That is not my job. I'm on M&A for this team. I'm not delivering in the field."
I was,
so.
I was gonna ask. I said you just alluded to the fact that you're doing M&A for a company as opposed to a bank. Could you talk about what the differences were and maybe what the experiences that you had back at Lincoln, how they transferred over to DCC?
Yeah, so there was definitely a few things that were directly transferable, and then there's some new elements. So the overall, like, At DCC, I was involved in a couple divestments as well as a couple buy side processes. So the divestments were true and true, like the exact same. It was assembling data for a marketing deck, a SIM as we call it in banking, preparing that, finding potential buyers for the division, contacting them, leading them through the diligence process, negotiating a purchase agreement. All of that was what I was doing at Lincoln. That was self-explanatory for me, coming from a banking background. The elements that were kind of new were the more so buy side related. It was kind of first off building an operating model from the buy side perspective that incorporated synergies across investment opportunities. So going through and saying, hey, there might be an opportunity to consolidate locations, or we have a couple extra bobtails or trucks in this case, so we can sell them and realize some cash. All these kind of synergy thinking was new. And then the biggest piece uh, was the PMI, the post-merger integration planning. So um, in banking, your job is done once the deal closes. In corporate development specifically, that's really where your job like increases in responsibility too. All the numbers can look good on paper. Um, you can kind of justify it in a financial model, but if you don't do the integration plan that you set out to do, it's going to be a waste of money. It's not going to work out for the combined entity. So that was kind of the big eye opener of, whoa, you finish a deal and it's not done. It's actually the work's just getting started to make sure a lot of those kind of promises are actually seen through into the organization over the next kind of 30, 60, 90 days, just kind of the near term stuff, and then 6 months to a year.
Got it. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Um, and then talk us through. Obviously, you were at DCC for 2 years, 2 years,
Year and a half.
year and a half. Talk us through why you kind of decided to make the change to where you're at now, at least for the next day or two, and and what was different about Energy Exemplar versus DCC that made you want to make that pivot.
Yeah. So DCC had a couple of things that were kind of the impetus for me to leave. I think I mentioned earlier that there was kind of a strategic direction that they were promoting of kind of this diversification away from propane services. That was really interesting to me. I wanted to be part of kind of an energy services platform versus a just kind of propane services. I think propane is an interesting industry, but it definitely didn't motivate me the way kind of I was motivated by renewable energy services, or even just like home services. So there was a little bit of we couldn't get that kind of diversification away that ultimately pushed. The bigger piece though was DCC was owned by a Berkshire Hathaway-esque holding company based in Ireland. And it was tooth and nails when it was assembled by way of a few acquisitions by this holding company to grow their energy business in the States. They had some bad bets. Just in a couple of the investments they made performed really terribly. So they had essentially put really high goalposts for what you needed for them to finance deals. And there were too high of thresholds because we couldn't put in bids that were competitive with market. So we just weren't getting deals done. Whereas our European colleagues in the energy division were doing deals left and right. So it felt like we were a little bit of an orphan within the broader DCC energy landscape. And when you come over wanting to like get deals done and you're not getting the institutional support, plus you're in an industry that you don't have super high conviction on. Propane is a declining industry. So being on the growth team in a declining industry I don't recommend that. So you had a couple things weighing you in, and then there was also just a push for wanting to see what else was out there. This was based out in the western suburbs of Chicago, kind of hour and a half commute. Didn't want to drive down 290 anymore. But that's just a personal thing. Overall, it was a great experience at DCC, but I think I was ready to see kind of a different lens in the energy space, and is the reason I pivoted to Energy Exemplar.
Yeah, got it. And at these companies like DCC, Energy Exemplar, and where you're moving next, what are like the typical team sizes that you're working with, and how have you handled that?
Yeah, so they're all small teams. Corporate development in general, unless you're at a true like shop that just cranks out 20 deals a year, it's going to be teams of 1 to 5 people max. I was talking to an individual at Caterpillar yesterday, and Fortune 100 company, their corp dev team is 6 people, and they're doing $1 billion deals. We're looking at $10 million deals, like smaller deals. So we don't need 6 people, but yeah. So DCC was 3 individuals. Energy Exemplar, it was 2 individuals, me and a boss, and then the job I'll be joining is 2 individuals as well, which is pretty typical of VP or director of M&A. And then the titles, I mean, just you're number 2 at the end of the day. I've been an analyst, I'll be a manager, but you're still the bottom of the totem pole. So the title, it only looks good on a LinkedIn profile. It doesn't mean anything if you're not the head of the group.
Now I'd love to get into what maybe you're gonna say for your later podcast, but it'd be great to talk a little bit about how AI, especially in the past couple of years, has changed the way you work, and
Yeah.
maybe even we've talked. You already have very lean teams, but how you think that will have effects more broadly in the energy and M&A space.
You've heard of AI, right?
Yeah, what's that short for? Alden is no. Yes. So 2 things. Given the small deals teams, I don't think AI is going to be one of those like carving out, making a 2-person team one. It's a productivity booster, but I think it really enables you to move faster in a process, as well as uh, attack and look at more prospective deals. It's not going to be we have overhead from a 2-person team. Corporate development also gets, because you have a lot of interactions with the C-suite, you get pulled in. I would say 70% of my current role is looking at deals, and 30% is ad hoc strategic projects for the CFO, general counsel, CEO. They just want something done and know we have a reputation for doing good work. So we get pulled in. It helps just increase productivity as you're pulled in a number of directions within the organization. In general, there's a few different tools that we're using that are super helpful. First would be the overall sourcing. A big part of corporate development, especially for smaller companies that don't want to be competing in banker-led processes, is establishing relationships, finding targets. And a really helpful AI is going through company databases and finding, okay, these are our 6 targets identified. Find me 10 others that are similar to that. So getting a basis for sourcing and origination of deals, kind of using AI before you go into a board meeting, to challenge your assumptions. So a lot of things we're put out a bunch of decks where this is our investment thesis, poke holes in it. So you can use a Claude, a ChatGPT for simple things like that, just to test your thesis and anticipate what's going to come. And if ChatGPT is saying what's this element, it also is just an extra set of eyes on decks and presentations that you're making. The biggest piece of AI in the M&A space it is much going to be a word piece. So it's going to help define slides, write executive summaries based on diligence findings. In the consulting space, I know we do a lot of primary research in corp dev. And so it's the organize all my notes into a 10-page deck from 20 GLG calls, stuff like that. It's really helpful. We have not found AI be useful in the modeling or the quantitative element to corp dev and M&A. So it's
Yeah.
much more on the qualitative side that it's useful to this point. I haven't been super experimentative. I know there's a few companies like a Mosaic that does like builds the model for you. I think there's too many inputs realistically for that to make a ton of sense. And if you don't know how it's built, it's really hard to adjust it to. So I have not used it on that side.
I see. And then backing up to your earlier comment on investment banking, seems like you have a lot of conviction that AI will be very disruptive there. Why do you think that? And when do you think we'll see that kind of shift if we're not seeing it already?
I bet there's some right now, but right now they're kind of in trial runs with the analyst class. A lot of what you do as an investment banking analyst, at least from my experience, is qualitative in general. So it's building of slides, it's shaping an investment thesis or key investment considerations to a company. If you talk to any ex-banker, they will tell you about buyer strips. So when you pitch a company, you have to come up with who is a viable buyer in sell-side M&A. And you end up spending 40 hours going through like what companies are out there, what have made investments in this space, what is their financial wherewithal. And people can it takes a day plus to do that. An LLM or AI tool can probably spit that out in like 30 minutes. It's if you're in a time crunch, why would you have the analyst do that for a day when you can have an input and then have someone just check that work and augment it? It's a good experience from a analyst because you learn about a lot of companies and you learn about what financial wherewithal, appetite for deals, and it definitely sets you up to start thinking in that strategic lens. But wow, it was a time crunch, and there's a lot of things that like just aren't super efficient in banking that AI just makes more efficient. Because the contrarian view to that would be you got to get reps somewhere, and if AI is just going to replace that, then people are just not going to be good in the later stages. And it's like private equity, corp dev and even banking is like just not going to have a pipeline of talent, which I don't think is the objective. So it's not going to be eliminated, but I think analyst sizes are going to be cut down because a lot of those core responsibilities are being made more efficient via AI tools.
Yep. That makes a lot of sense. And I think similar from consulting, at least 60 to 70% of the work, I think, is definitely a target for AI disruption. It'll be interesting to see. I think your point that you made around the necessary skills in building that talent pipeline is really key. And it'll be interesting to see, how these companies, at least the major companies that do hire 30 analysts per office, think about their talent development as they also make investments in AI and try to get more productive and try to increase their profits. It'll be interesting to see how that plays out.
Yeah, I mean, from a consulting standpoint, it's like, do you pay the 110K for the associate, or do you pay 30K for your cloud subscription, and then you overwork whatever the next step is. They leave, then you're spending 40K on recruitment costs to backfill that position, and it's like, yeah, bottom line, it doesn't save you that much suddenly in the grand scheme of things.
I wanted to pivot to networking a little bit because I think you've done an excellent job of it over the course of your career. Clearly, you've been able to land job after job after job. So talk us through kind of how you approach networking, what you found to be positives, what you found to be negatives, and kind of the skills that you need to have to be able to make these pivots when you want to be intentional about your career path.
Yeah. So networking, I'd say, as a college student versus a professional are going to be kind of two different buckets. College student, I think everyone knows that it's a little awkward. You don't have any skills, but as you go through the networking process, be it cold emails or I would not recommend cold calling anyone. I think that's a little start with an email when you can um, to set up a call, but it's coming from show just general curiosity. Always be prepared, know what they're due, but don't try and know everything. Like go on those calls to learn. To, people I've found, especially when they're talking to college kids, like talking. They're happy to talk about themselves, their roles and responsibilities. They were in those shoes uh, one day. Yes, they might be doing it because they're trying to find a job, but a lot of people can at least relate to a college student networking. So just biggest tips would be polite, always be on time, be flexible with professionals, and show just an innate curiosity to like soak up as much from that conversation. The worst thing you can do is show up late or cancel last minute and be unprepared. I think any young professional or just professional in general is happy to make that sacrifice, take some time to talk to these students. But if they showed up like, so what do you do? What's investment banking when you're doing a networking call? That's just kind of a slap in the face. Like they're doing this because their mom told them to do a networking call or Ross called and they're like, oh, you haven't done any networking calls. You're way behind. Um, so the second bucket would be kind of once you have professional experience, I think there's really two elements to it. So there's the first of like, I'm looking for a job, maybe. So you're networking to find a new job versus you're networking to really just build out a network and get to the roots of the word. Mm, I found there's a couple different ways to do both. And networking through jobs is you can or for a job is probably a little more similar to the college experience of like finding companies that you'd be interested in, finding people with maybe a shared connection on LinkedIn or went to same school as you, finding that kind of way in the door. Um, and going from there kind of, but it's clear. It's definitely good to state your intentions early on, not saying like, hey, I want to just talk to you to find out more about BCG or ZS. Like this is something that you want to say, hey, I'd be interested in potentially joining. Would you have time to talk about your experience there? Be straightforward. When you're just trying to meet people and hear what they do, I think networking doesn't have to be super like on the clock during business hours. I think people are pretty uh, open if you're curious and you're engaging enough to meet for coffee or talk about it as little things like, oh, I'm going to be in Wrigley on Saturday talking at Old Crow about what you do and little things like that. Well, that's really interesting. Let's follow up. Maybe we'd hop on a 30-minute call this week to tell more. It's as simple as like learning about what else is out there, what different industries, different types of roles. And then, I mean, I love LinkedIn. I think LinkedIn's actually a really powerful tool to just like, oh, this person, you see them repost something, it's like, oh, I should reconnect with that person. And it served me well. The role that I'm moving into uh, was kind of pushed because my old CFO is the current CFO at this role. So that was kind of my foray into that's someone I really respected and had a good relationship. We talked baseball all the time, which um, was something like a good relationship outside of strictly work, and it ultimately led to, I think, a big reason why I landed my newest position. So um, it's just you got to be prepared, you got to be curious and uh, professional in general of how you approach it. But people don't want to network with the geezer who just has all their notes and their bow tie on. Like, you got to be a person. People are taking time out of their day. They don't want to just talk to a robot. They want to like, you got to be able to converse about something other than work also for a second. So it's not just a complete waste of time on both ends.
Going back to what you said earlier about the airplane test during interviews, it sounds like that could also be true just generally when you're talking with people. We found, and I see it's true at Kellogg often, it's you just make a friendship and then consequently you realize there's some professional relationship that can come from it. Of course, if you're not a college student looking for a job, there is perhaps an ulterior motive, but if you can, connect closely, it's really powerful. And the second thing you mentioned about LinkedIn, spoke to a founder recently who said one of the best pieces of advice he's gotten and what he would advise for younger students is to be active on LinkedIn and to interact with people with whom you're excited about working in or in a space that you're curious about. So completely agree. It's a really powerful tool for people to use.
Yeah, I've got Brick on my phone, which is like a app disabler.
Not sponsored. Not sponsored.
Not sponsored. I just want to say it's a productivity tool I use. I have all of the social medias blocked, but not LinkedIn. So I can scroll LinkedIn during the day, and I find myself doing that very often. So it's a great tool, obviously.
For our viewers, it sounds like if you want to break into corp dev or investment banking, learn baseball.
Definitely.
And then
Says the guy wearing the Boston Red Sox hat.
I think as a young professional, trying to advance their career, there's a lot of pressure to get yourself in the right spot. I mean, eventually you want to have a family, have kids, a house, all the things that come with getting older. So how do you balance, the pressures of building that career and building a successful career that you're proud of, and also living your life, enjoying the life and the journey along the way?
Yeah. I'd say it's definitely difficult, especially if you stick in banking. Um, that is just I hate to say it, it's a cutthroat industry that requires you to just be online constantly, and work has to be kind of your first and foremost priority. It's a big reason why I left. Wanted a little more of that, as cheesy as it sounds, work-life balance. And for me, I was willing to maybe take a little pay cut versus but getting my weekends free and the opportunity to cook and work out and socialize with individuals. I think that was a key element to why I joined Corp Dev versus maybe a private equity, which a lot of people in my path, which is a lot more of similarities to banking in terms of kind of structure and timing of when deliverables are needed by. Um, I think for me, it's if work is energizing during the day, um, like if you wake up, you log on, and you're motivated, you like the people you're working with, even if it's a long day, a 10, 11, 12-hour day, you still have some energy left through because you kind of have that, oh, I'm working for the common goal. It's not just I'm doing this for the paycheck. There's been times that I haven't felt that, and I've been kind of I'm doing this just cause. And I don't know if this is the right solution, but that's when I've kind of felt the need to pivot to be something where I'm more mission aligned with the business. I feel as though my colleagues are supporting me, and I think there's just a general like what I'm doing has an impact beyond just uh, filling my bank account and paying rent. Like so for me, there's a if you don't have that motivation that keeps you going to be able to have energy outside of work, you might have to transition, or you might have to switch within a company or have conversations. But if you can identify that piece of things aren't maybe the way I envisioned them or way I wanted them, I think that's the biggest step, because some people kind of get complacent, thinking, oh, this is what my dad went through. There are a lot of opportunities. I know it's not a great job market, but there are a lot of opportunities. So finding something that motivates you and you think is a good fit with good people is key for managing that extracurriculars, because you're just going to have that extra energy. You're not going to feel drained from work. It's not going to feel like just a total burden, which is, I think, in some cases what people feel in their roles.
Yeah, no, definitely couldn't agree more. I think a lot of people who are maybe in these high stress, high strung jobs are going through life and recognize that maybe this isn't a place they want to be, but are just complacent with kind of where they're at, where they're going. And also when you're working 80-hour, 68-hour weeks, it's hard to, set that time aside and be intentional about networking and finding a solution for yourself.
In that case, Alden, we really loved the conversation. We're going to do something with you that is going to be a little bit less detail oriented. We want to get your impulse reactions. We're going to do some lightning round questions. Are you down for that?
Yeah, perfect.
All right, sounds great. The cool thing about this is it's going to be lightning round for Will and myself too. We'll be coming up with the questions on the fly. No, we asked.
Right, it's improv.
All right.
Right.
So I'll kick us off on a lighter note. What's an underrated part of Chicago as a native that people who are not from here wouldn't know?
Ravenswood area, where I grew up.
Favorite sports team?
Chicago Blackhawks.
Most interesting part about being in the energy sector?
How prevalent it is in literally everything we do.
Cats or dogs?
Dogs.
What is the person in your life that you think has had the greatest influence on your professional career?
You can take me out of this conversation.
And Will excluded.
So wouldn't be Will, let me tell you that. No, my dad, for sure.
Favorite bar in Chicago?
Summertime or wintertime?
Fall.
Fall. Okay, give me Kirkwitz.
Very good.
Kirkwitz, IU. And if there was one thing that you could adjust or you would have done differently in your professional career, what might that be?
I would have held out drinking coffee even longer. I did my entire investment banking career without having a sip of coffee, but recently I got into it and I'm kind of really into it now. So I'm caffeine dependent now.
All right, last one. If you could pick any superpower, what would it be?
I would love the ability to be able to communicate with animals, Dr. Doolittle style.
That is an interesting one.
That's great. Well, it's been incredible having you on this podcast, learning about your journey. Had some super sage advice, and I think we definitely learned. Maybe Will knows telepathically, but learned a ton about your background, and really excited for others to hear it as well.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much for having me, guys. Have a good one.
Yeah, you too. Thanks, Alden.
Thanks so much for listening.
And we'll see you next time.